Euthanize in News.
Hello and welcome to yet another exciting edition of your favorite online TV series, Youth Weekly on UTV Africa, the program that brings to you highlights of the events that made the headlines over the last week, the language and perspective of young people. I am Faith Thomas.
And I am Hyelda. You're welcome to the program. Here's a rundown of some of the issues that made news in the headlines last week. We're waiting for sack letters, say defiant lecturers.
Federal government withdraws threat to sack lecturers.
Jonathan encouraging corruption, Tambuwal.
Obasanjo tells Jonathan to forget 2015.
2015, no Jonathan, no election, Niger Delta Youth.
Eze Kwesili laments decade of failed leadership.
Fire guards coin oil station in Abuja.
8,000 Nigerians rot in foreign prisons, Dabiri, Erawa.
National Orientation Agency holds one-day National Youth Summit.
And on the foreign scene, World Unites for Mandela Memorial. These are some of the news that made the headlines over the last week. Please join us in a moment as we take on some of these issues. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Youth Weekly, Euthanize in News.
We are part of the solution.
We bring you youth perspective on issues. Youths have a voice.
We have a story to tell.
Youth Weekly, Euthanize in News.
Welcome back to the program. If you're just joining us, this is still Youth Weekly on UTV Africa. And on this segment of the program, we take on some of the issues that made the headlines in the news. Well, you're aware that the world is really on a standstill as everybody who matters, presidents, kings and queens, are actually paying tribute to the memory and the legacy of the late Madiba, President Nelson Mandela. Now, to discuss this and share his perspectives on this, we have no other than the Executive Director of Youngsters Foundation, Mr. Kingsley Bangwell himself. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Quite an honor to be here to have such a very, very intriguing conversation on a very, very, highly, revered personality like Madiba.
Yes, and on that note, what do you think, Madiba represented in his lifetime?
If you ask me, Madiba is Africa's real true leader. For me, that is the best way to describe him. He's a man who understands the concept of leadership, and then he was able to demonstrate it. A lot of people talk leadership, but he lives leadership. And for me, that is the distinction between him and most African leaders, who I'm really surprised are present at his funeral, because they do not connect with his values and principles. And so I'm surprised that everyone wants to associate with his name at this time. But he is a man that represents what I can define as a transformational leadership. He understands the concept of leadership, that is a leadership that is inspired by a compelling vision to improve the state of people and not self.
A compelling vision.
Yes.
In fact, I think that's one very important thing about the man. And then that brings us to the question, what lessons are there to learn from his life?
Well, if you ask me, one of the lessons, I just talked about when he had this compelling vision to serve people and not serve self. Most African, I don't call them leaders anymore, most African state managers, right, are just there to serve themselves, right, with their cohorts. They are there to divide the rents of the states, the revenues of the states and all of that, and use it to possibly even develop more developed countries where they go to stash this stolen wealth. But now that was a man that was selfless. He was sick. He was treated in South Africa. Everything about him was... He lived in South Africa, he was born in South Africa, he struggled in South Africa, schooled in South Africa, fought for South Africa's liberation, ruled in South Africa. When he was sick, every time he was sick, he was treated in a South African hospital, and he died in a South African hospital. So he's a man that was selfless, committed to his people, and then he also understood the concept of compromise. He was willing to shift ground, because the Mandela that we know after he left prison was not exactly the same Mandela that went to prison.
Of course,
he was able to, make adjustment and compromise for good when it was necessary. I'm not talking about compromise for evil, but compromise for good when it was necessary. He was willing to, he said, listen to his head and not his heart about the treatment he got from apartheid when he became president. He could as well have come up with laws that would,
be favorable to him,
and also bring some kind of retribution on the the whites and those who promoted apartheid. He said that was what his heart wanted to do, and everyone will connect with that, the pain and all of that.
Talking wanted about revenge. Passion, yeah.
But his head told him, if you do that, South Africa will be consumed, and he listened to his heart. So I see a man that has a compelling vision for the people, and then I see a man that is willing to make sacrifice. I mean, compromise for good. And who's every day lived for people. I mean, that's just...
you said something really important, that he had vision. And I think it's one thing that these days seems to be lacking
in our leaders.
Especially. It's more about...
at the memorial service, President Obama made a statement, which I would love to quote copiously. He said, "There are too many of us who happily embrace Madiba's legacy of racial reconciliation, but passionately resist even modest reforms that would challenge chronic poverty and growing inequality. There are too many leaders who claim solidarity with Madiba's struggle for freedom, but do not tolerate dissent from their own people. And there are too many of us who stand on the sidelines, comfortable in complacency or cynicism, when our voices must be heard." So what is your take on this profound statement by President Barack Obama?
It sounds like a man who in his home, who should know what to do to take care of his home, would wait for an outsider to come and tell him, you need to pay your children's school fees, you need to take good care of your wife, you need to make sure there's light and water and food and all of that. It's amazing that African leaders are unashamedly, how do I put it now? They are becoming bolder in impunity, in ineptitude, and sometimes you don't know how to describe African state managers. So it had to take someone the son of Africa, but President Obama to come remind us of what leadership is about. I just hope that African leaders will listen, African state managers will listen to what President Obama has said, because he represents what he is saying, but most African state leaders who unashamedly are there, they went to South Africa to connect with that man.
To pay tributes.
I thought some Africans, Nigerians and the rest there should have, gone to, protest to ask their leaders, what did you come here to do?
Well, I think that there's a lot from the man's life for leaders to learn from, and most definitely young people from today. Yeah.
Yes, but finally, on a very brief note, how do you think his memory will best be honored?
The best way to honor Mandiba's memory is to promote his values and principles. You can make t-shirts with his name, you can sing songs with his name, you can organize seminars. And that's the funny part. Most African state managers are going to start naming great monuments, libraries, state houses after Mandiba. They are going to do a lot of ceremony, music concerts, big speeches. You understand? But these people are not ready to connect with his principles and values. And the greatest way to ignite and to remember Mandela's legacy, which as an organization we've decided we will do something around it, is his values and his principles. The values and the principles he stood for. If African state managers, if half of them can begin to stand for those values and principles, Africa will leapfrog in less than a decade. Africa has everything it needs to blossom. What is holding us back are our current state managers who do not have the values of Mandiba.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Kingsley Bangwell, for sharing such a deep perspective on the life and legacy of Mr. Nelson Mandela. And I hope our audience out there have taken enough out of what he has said. We are hoping that we can be able to actually translate his values in our everyday lives. On this note, we were at a one-day National Youth Summit organized by the National Orientation Agency that talks about rebuilding the nation's image through the youth. That will be a feature you'll be seeing in a moment. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this break.
Now for us in our country, our youths remain the greatest, because everywhere you go, you see a Nigerian youth, you will know by his exploits, by what he is engaged in doing. Therefore, the youth of Nigeria, including those of you who are here, remain the greatest.
The present administration under President Goodluck Jonathan is fully aware that no nation can rise above the quality of our youth. This explains why the federal government has created multiple programs and platforms for youth empowerment.
Today, the dominant values are about corruption, about impunity. In fact, a powerful man is the one who goes around and says, I will do it, nothing will happen. I will clap for him. They will say he's a big boy. A big boy is the one who is irresponsible, because doing things and nobody can challenge you means you are an irresponsible person. If you are a responsible person, there will be somebody who can challenge you. Either your family member can challenge you, but even if all your religious leader can challenge you, if all this won't fail, the law must be able to challenge you. I was expecting a 50% youth and 50% adults, in the sense that many of the problems confronted by the youth today are caused by adults who ought to listen and change their ways, so that the youth can also learn from them and approach and do their behavior or behave in a proper way. So many of my comments are addressed to all youth. So I try.
It's about, getting young people starting from cradle to leadership to understand the core values of the country, to understand the right things, to work together with governments, to improve the nation, the face of the nation, because the thing is that if you have a system and a government that works well, every single one person will benefit from it.
My name is Okonwo David. I'm from Government Secondary School, Jabi. I would like to use this medium to thank the government, the National Orientation Agency, for giving us this platform, to learn more about what is happening in our country, what is happening in our geographical area, and how to tackle some economic and social challenges facing us in Nigeria as citizens. Thank you. We really learned a lot in this program, but there's one distinctive thing that I've learned today, which is being self-reliance. This program has taught me today to be self-reliance, to look forward to what I'll give to the government as a citizen, and not always depend on government.
I think what's important is young people need to understand the power and the role that they play in a democratic process. It's very, very important, because the realization of this role informs the frequency of your engagement. So young people need to understand first that they are a stakeholder. And then with respect to attitudinal change, any man that does not have a vision, is like someone or is like a flag on a flag post. So you need to know or dream the kind of country or the kind of society that you want, and then understand the kind of values which I consider to be the requisites of attaining or achieving that particular vision.
I think we can restrain our steps, but we must use platforms first like this, National Orientation Agency, and of course the government, to identify where we are and where we should be and we need to be.
Wow, I must say it was a very, very interesting summit, but most importantly it was educative, it was very informative, and above everything else I think it was very, very timely.
Very timely.
Yes,
indeed.
and I think that the NOA takes a lot of kudos for doing this. It was, for you, what stood out the most?
Well, the session on youth vices, implications for national development, and anchored by Professor E.O. Alemika, he actually just hinted on a lot that bordered on the implications for young people. He was talking about insubordination as youth vices. Young people have a flagrant disregard for rules, in our own time more so, and it's resulting in a lot of chaos and crisis. And I feel we need to fall back on those old values of obedience, regard for authority, if we're going to reshape the image of this nation for the better.
And just like the theme of the program, rebuilding the national image through the youth. So I think it's important, just like the things he outlined during his session, he talked about the need for society to promote values such as hard work, self-discipline, honesty is something you hardly find around these days, and it's important for the society to have a predominant set of values. That way we'll get to move forward. Instead of the quick fix, all of us want to get there, and then society tends to add to that pressure. So I think it was a very, very timely summit.
Yeah, it was a day well spent.
Yes.
And I hope that the young people out there get the message. Well, this is all we can take on this week's edition of Youth Weekly on UTV Africa. Join us on our Facebook platform, facebook.com/UTV Africa, and be part of the conversation. You could also follow us on our Twitter handle at UTV Africa. This is all we can take on this edition. We hope you will keep a date with us same time next week. From my end here is bye-bye.